The idea is if the virus is allowed to spread unabated, variants will form. Okay, but what gives people the idea Africa is experiencing high levels of spread? People assume because Africa has extremely low vaccination rates that the virus must be running rampant on the continent. But look at this map. Africa has extremely low levels of spread. Even South Africa, which has more than most of the continent, is still seeing much lower rates than places like the United States, Europe, and Russia. And if you don't believe the case rates, look at the death rates. Africa, for whatever reason, simply hasn't been hit that hard with the virus. Maybe it's the weather, maybe it's background immunity, maybe they don't have enough global visitors, maybe they just haven't been hit hard yet. Whatever it is, it's clear they're not a hotspot for spread. That would obviously be Europe, Russia, and the United States by looking at the maps. Yet the narrative that's currently circulating is the reason we ended up with Omicron is because of poor vaccination rollout in Africa. Some are blaming the pharmaceutical companies for not releasing their patents, claiming big pharma greed is what has kept the world from gaining access to the valuable vaccine. 2 days before Omicron mayhem hit the news, Reuters reported that South Africa had asked Johnson & Johnson and Pfizer to stop sending in their vaccines because people were just not interested in taking them. They said there was too much hesitancy in the adult population and they had an overabundance of the shots and would offer the rest to 12 to 17-year-olds. 2 days later, a strange new variant was announced, labeled by the WHO as a variant of concern, and travel bans on southern Africa were enacted. Now, what's odd is health experts have admitted they know next to nothing about this new variant. They don't know yet if it's more contagious. They don't know if it causes the same or worse or even lesser symptoms than Delta. They don't even know how widespread it is. Yet they gave it a label, variant of concern, that they haven't even given to previous variants which have wreaked havoc in parts of the world. For example, the Lambda variant, which ravaged through Peru, causing Peru to have the highest rate of deaths in the world, a variant that swept through South America, a variant that is in the United States. And in fact, Florida's Jackson Memorial Hospital says accounted for 3% of their hospitalizations this summer, is still labeled as a variant of interest, one step lower than a variant of concern. Perhaps the collective freakout was over the fact travelers were appearing all over the world infected with the variant. People in the UK, Hong Kong, Israel, Netherlands, Australia, Germany, Denmark, Canada, and more were testing positive with Omicron. What's more is, we know that in order for people to travel internationally, they most likely need to have been vaccinated. Botswana announced the initial people infected with Omicron in their country were 4 fully vaccinated foreign diplomats. They had visited the African country and had left in early November. Germany requires travelers entering the country to be fully vaccinated. So does Israel, so does Hong Kong, so does Australia, so does Canada, so does much of the world. It's very difficult right now to travel internationally if you're not fully vaccinated, unless you're a young child. 2 flights that were midair from Johannesburg to Amsterdam when the news broke about the variant were forced to divert their passengers to health officials where they waited for hours to undergo testing. 600 passengers were tested, and it turned out 10% of the plane came back positive with COVID. 61 passengers in total. Of the 61 who tested positive, only 13 had the new Omicron variant. The rest had Delta or possibly older variants, which makes us wonder how long this has been going on. Fully vaccinated people are not being regularly tested coming off a plane, so who knows? It was only an 11-hour flight. Health experts say it's not likely they caught the virus midair, then tested positive upon landing. 10% must have boarded the plane infected. Now, unvaccinated travelers headed to the Netherlands must test negative within 48 hours of boarding. Fully vaccinated passengers can board without being tested. This should perhaps call into question the idea that vaccinated passengers do not need to undergo testing prior to boarding. In light of all of these details, I think it's fair for South Africa to question whether or not they are truly ground zero for this variant, or if perhaps travelers who thought they would be free from COVID brought it in with them. This to me just kind of reeks of another example of blame the unvaccinated. And now, instead of blaming the unvaccinated in the United States or in Europe or wherever we are, we're instead now blaming this continent in South Africa, saying, well, it's because they're unvaccinated. We don't really know where this variant came from. But